Emma Holloway was once the picture of a devoted daughter until her mother whispered, "Why, Emma?" With her final breath. That one chilling question unraveled a story of betrayal, hidden greed, and a murder masked as love. What began as a tragic loss would expose a carefully staged crime, revealing that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who brings you tea at bedtime. On a quiet Sunday morning, the town of Brookridge stirred gently under a pale sky. Life moved slowly in this small community, where neighbors still waved from porches and local news rarely strayed from weather forecasts or lost pets. But everything shifted when a call came through to emergency services. Emma Holloway had found her elderly mother, Margaret, unresponsive in bed. Her voice was shaky, panicked, barely forming words. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Margaret had already passed. Her skin was cool, her expression calm, as if she had simply drifted off in her sleep. The town grieved with Emma. Margaret was well known in the community, a retired schoolteacher who spent her later years tending to her garden and spoiling her grandchildren. Emma, her only daughter, had been seen frequently visiting, often running errands and helping with medications. After the passing of her father 4 years earlier, Emma became Margaret's closest companion. Their bond was admired, envied even. Some said Emma gave up her own life to care for her aging mother. The death was ruled a heart attack. There were no bruises, no injuries, no signs of distress. The medical examiner noted some irregularities in Margaret's heartbeat in her final checkups, and her age made it unsurprising. Emma cooperated fully with authorities, providing information about medications and recent doctor visits. She seemed devastated but composed, holding herself together for the sake of her family. The funeral was held 4 days later. Emma wore black, read a poem at the service, and cried through her eulogy. Her pain looked genuine. After the burial, Emma took a few weeks off work and stayed mostly indoors. Friends dropped off meals and offered company, but she preferred solitude. Her grief appeared profound, and no one questioned it. The idea that something darker might be hidden beneath that mourning face didn't cross anyone's mind. In a town like Brookridge, people trusted what they saw. Life slowly began to resume. Emma returned to work. The flowers on Margaret's grave wilted and were replaced by new ones. The community moved on, grateful the woman had passed peacefully, surrounded by love. But 3 months later, a single forgotten item in a dusty attic would change the narrative and begin to unravel the truth about what really happened that Sunday morning. The attic was dim and musty, its wooden beams groaning softly with age. Margaret's cousin, Lillian, had volunteered to help clear out the house so it could be sold. She worked slowly, sorting through old boxes of photographs, sewing supplies, and worn Christmas decorations. Tucked behind a loose panel of insulation, Lillian's hand brushed against something hard. Curious, she pulled it out, a small, rusted metal box with a tarnished latch. It was locked, but the lid gave way with a firm twist. Inside were decades of Margaret's personal journals, their pages yellowed and delicate. Most of the entries were mundane, filled with musings about the weather, recipes, and gardening notes. But as Lillian flipped toward the newer entries, she began to notice a shift in tone. The handwriting turned jagged, rushed. The words became anxious, almost frantic. Margaret wrote about feeling watched, about not trusting the food being made for her, and about her daughter acting strangely. She accused Emma of controlling her medication, of isolating her from friends, and even hinted that someone wanted her gone. The final entry read simply, "If something happens to me, look closer, please." Lillian brought the journals straight to the police. At first, the officers were hesitant. The death had been officially closed. There was no crime scene, no foul play noted at the time. But the urgency in Margaret's final words couldn't be ignored. The detective assigned to the case requested the autopsy file again. While the official cause of death remained heart failure, a small detail stood out during re-examination. Traces of digoxin in Margaret's system were higher than expected, bordering on toxic. Digoxin was part of Margaret's prescribed medication, used to regulate heart rhythms. But in large amounts, it could cause cardiac arrest. The levels hadn't triggered alarm during the initial autopsy because they were just under the threshold of concern. But paired with the journal entries, the suspicion grew stronger. Emma had managed all her mother's prescriptions. She had access, motive, and now possibly a victim trying to speak from beyond the grave. The police began looking into Emma's movements more closely. What started as a routine estate cleanup had now reopened a case once believed to be closed. Behind the grief and flowers had been a hidden voice, and it was finally being heard. The deeper investigators looked into Emma Holloway's life, the more cracks they found in her carefully maintained image. On the surface, she appeared to be a grieving daughter who had put her own life on pause to care for her aging mother. But financial records began telling a very different story. In the weeks following Margaret's death, a significant amount of money over bank statements revealed expensive purchases that didn't align with someone in mourning. Emma had ordered a new designer wardrobe, paid off maxed-out credit cards, and even put down a deposit for a luxury condo in a neighboring city. Surveillance footage later showed her touring that condo complex less than 2 weeks after the funeral. It was clear she had been planning to relocate, perhaps to start over, perhaps to leave behind more than just grief. Investigators also obtained access to Emma's digital history. On her laptop, search records showed alarming patterns. Searches for "how much digoxin is fatal," "can you overdose slowly on heart medication," and "symptoms of natural death in elderly." These searches were made weeks before her mother's passing. Combined with the journal entries and the elevated digoxin levels in the autopsy report, a chilling pattern emerged, one that pointed not just to motive but to intent. Emma had also been under intense financial pressure. She had lost her job a year prior, and her unemployment benefits had run out. She was behind on rent and her car payments were overdue. According to emails retrieved from her account, she had been declined for multiple loans, but her mother's estate, life insurance, and savings could offer an escape from all of it. Even her social media began to look curated. While posts showed her in moments of reflection and sorrow, some were clearly timed to align with life insurance payouts and bank transactions. Each post crafted sympathy, each public message of love masking the possibility of premeditation. What had seemed like a natural death now looked increasingly calculated. The case was no longer about a sudden loss. It was about a careful unraveling of lies, each one layered with intention, and the police were just beginning to see how deep the deception truly ran. As the investigation deepened, attention turned to the medications Margaret had been taking in her final months. Digoxin, the heart drug found in her system, was prescribed in controlled doses and regularly refilled at a local pharmacy. Investigators obtained records that showed something unusual: an early refill of Margaret's prescription just 3 weeks before her death. The dosage ordered was slightly higher than her usual one. Security footage from the pharmacy confirmed that Emma, not Margaret, had picked up the medication. She wasn't authorized, but the pharmacist, familiar with the Holloways, didn't question it. Forensic experts were brought in to examine the remaining medication bottles recovered from the house. What they found was alarming. Several of the pills had been tampered with, opened, resealed, and packed with doses far above the recommended strength. Lab results confirmed that at least some of the digoxin capsules Margaret had been taking were strong enough to cause heart failure within days, possibly even hours, depending on her condition at the time. Emma's fingerprints were found on the tampered bottles. Though the evidence was mounting, there was still no definitive proof that Emma had intentionally caused her mother's death. Her lawyer argued the overdose could have been accidental, a clerical error, a manufacturing mistake, or even confusion on Margaret's part. But when investigators pulled pharmacy call logs, they found no record of Emma ever reporting concerns or errors about the medication. If there had been a mistake, she had remained silent. The next clue came from Margaret's caregiver log, a handwritten record she kept inconsistently. The final few pages, though barely legible, documented days when she felt dizzy and weak after taking her medicine. One entry simply read, "Emma says I'm imagining things again." It suggested Margaret may have tried to speak up, but her concerns were dismissed. Investigators also interviewed neighbors and family friends. Some recalled moments when Margaret seemed confused or worried in Emma's presence. One neighbor even remembered Margaret mentioning she didn't always feel safe alone at night. A strange admission, considering Emma was her main source of comfort. The accumulation of inconsistencies was too significant to ignore. The financial gain, the online searches, the prescription tampering, it all pointed to careful orchestration rather than coincidence. What started as a seemingly natural death now looked increasingly like a silent, methodical murder. And while Emma remained calm in public, behind closed doors, the foundation beneath her story was crumbling fast. Detectives combed through every piece of digital evidence they could recover from Emma's devices. Most of it reinforced the growing case against her: search histories, financial spreadsheets, and deleted emails. But the most damning piece came from an unexpected place. An audio file buried deep in the archive of her smartphone's voice memo app. It was unlabeled, time-stamped on the night before Margaret's death. The recording lasted just under 30 seconds, but what it captured was chilling. In the first few seconds, there was the sound of quiet movement, fabric rustling, perhaps a blanket shifting. Then came the soft, strained voice of an elderly woman, barely above a whisper. The words were hard to make out at first, but when enhanced, the audio revealed a heartbreaking question. Why, Emma? Followed by a gasp, then silence. Experts determined the voice matched known recordings of Margaret. The audio ended with a faint thud and the sound of footsteps moving away. Though not a confession, the memo placed Emma at her mother's side during her final moments and contradicted her original claim that she hadn't been with Margaret the night she died. She had told police she found her the next morning. Now, it was clear she had been there all along. Investigators concluded the recording was likely made by accident. Emma had possibly triggered the voice memo app unknowingly while in the room. It was a critical mistake, and one she never realized she made. Faced with overwhelming evidence, police arrested Emma Holloway. The community watched in disbelief as she was taken into custody. Many had known her for years, friendly, helpful, always by her mother's side. Her fall from grace sent shockwaves through Brookridge. In court, prosecutors presented a tight, well-documented case built on months of investigation. Emma's defense centered on emotional stress and unintentional overdose, but the jury was unconvinced. The motive, the planning, the tampered pills, and that haunting voice memo painted a picture too clear to ignore. Emma Holloway was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The same house where she once cared for her mother now sat silent and empty, a reminder of the lies that had been buried there. A daughter once praised for her devotion was now known as a cold, calculated killer. And Margaret's final words, captured by chance, echoed far beyond that quiet bedroom, ensuring the truth would never stay hidden.